Welcome back to the Rose to the Ceilings podcast. In today's episode, we have a special guest with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey there, my name is Erin Harris. I am founder and executive director of Undo Mindset. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a former educator. I spent 15 years in the classroom, and I actually ended my educational journey in a school shooting. And so, what we are creating is basically my post trauma recovery work that we are turning into a curriculum. We're trying to get out to our K-12s free of charge.
Can you tell us a little bit about the curriculum, maybe? What does it kind of consist of?
Absolutely. Yeah. We teach all sorts of brain stuff. We have 35 different skills and tools that we teach. And it really teaches you how to, I always talk about your brain as like a filing cabinet. So it helps you to really file away your papers correctly in the correct spots. So that when trauma happens, because I truly believe trauma is part of the lived experience, our human experience, we're able to file that trauma away into our filing cabinet correctly so that when you're older and grayer like me, you don't have to go get mental health supports like I did to take out those papers and try to refile them back in the right places. So we teach things like boundaries and coping skills. We teach all about your emotions, big hard emotions, understanding your anger. We teach how to make sure that your self care is really aligned. Teach kids, people all about their own values, how to apologize correctly, how to communicate in ways in which people will listen to you, things like that.
That's really nice. So what's like the end goal of this curriculum? Like what do you hope that people get out of this like the most?
Yeah, after being in the classroom for 15 years, I recognize that we talk about teaching to the whole person, but we're really not doing that with integrity. And so our goal is to really help all kids to develop their brain, to understand how to get that all of their thoughts and such into that frontal lobe. Um, Really help kids, get to a place where they're not dysregulated as often, where they feel calmer in their bodies, where they're more able to tackle stress, um, and just feel more at peace with kind of all the things in their inner workings.
Yeah, that's really nice. How do you decide on like the specific like 35 different things you teach? Like were there more that you like narrowed down or did you did you just have these bullet points ready? Like what was the process of developing those points specifically?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was really like I always tell people, we're not recreating the wheel. A lot of it was really truly like my post-trauma recovery work. Um, but we do have a lot of different additional lessons because as you kind of go down this brain journey, you realize it is a very vast and broad um, place to be. And so we have actually we have about 75 people on our team working on this, all 100% volunteers, myself included. And we have some really amazing experts that have helped us to guide our work to include additional, maybe deeper, more specific type lessons, understanding our biases, to understanding, various childhood trauma type things that we maybe would see later. Yeah, so I mean, we're always open to suggestions too. So we have a junior board, which is why I was obviously very interested in talking to y'all. But um, they also really help us to guide our work. I always say they're my actual bosses because your lived experience, your generation's lived experience is so vastly different than my generation's. I had AIM in high school. And so we want to make sure that your needs and wants and things that you all are looking for support in is really reflective in our curriculum. So we really utilize like our junior board to help us guide us in that work.
Do you feel like
That's really
oftentimes
lovely. It's
the
like they get a boss
perspective,
around.
do you feel like oftentimes the perspective of the junior board and the perspective of the older volunteers, do you feel like there's a big difference between that?
Yeah, that's actually really fascinating. We have a podcast as well, Undo Unplugged. You all are welcome to join us on it if you ever want to. But we just recorded our most recent episode like an hour ago. And I kept talking to them and I was like, okay, but stress, we were talking about stress. I was like, stress, it's really social media, right? And they were like, no. And I was like, but it is social media, right? And they were like, no. And it might be just their particular, we had two of them on, so it might be just their particular experience. But I do think that the student perspective or our young adults and our kids' perspective is sometimes maybe exacerbated because of the adult world. So I would say that they are similar challenges that we're seeing. And I would say that they are very much exacerbated by our bigger world issues that we're seeing that is causing like our adults a lot of stress. It's really impacting our kiddos as well.
I'm also curious about your perspective as an educator, like from the beginning of your educator journey, since you've been teaching for so long. How has that kind of changed or developed till now?
You mean like as far as like the culture within the school systems and stuff?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I think that our I think that it's important for us as educators to keep up with the kids and let the kids a lot of times kind of guide that work. And I don't know if our educational system has quite changed and kept up with the needs of our kids over the last several decades. Um, and so um, I would say I'm seeing a spiraling effect to where like the kids are kind of getting disinterested or maybe feeling not respected or appreciated. And so over the years, especially post pandemic, I think we're seeing a lot of behavioral challenges, a lot of behaviors that we maybe weren't seeing before. And I think that could be really attributed to a lot of things. I think that the pandemic was traumatizing in a certain level. And it was very unexpected. And when people experience trauma, they exhibit certain characteristics and they tend to behave maybe not as great as they would have otherwise. Um, so I think there's a lot of, I guess to answer your question, over 15 years of teaching, I have seen things get more and more challenging in our classrooms. And I see a lot of adults being more concerned, but I'm not seeing quite enough changes in the system itself to actually meet the needs of our kids. I'm curious to know, you all are in school as well. Would you agree with that? Do you feel like that's pretty accurate?
I guess it's hard because we don't have a comparison to
Yes,
how
it's
school
true.
was maybe 10, 20 years ago.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a good point. Does
I
it
think
feel to you like it's stressful?
I think what we're seeing that's pretty clear now is that the schools are struggling a little to keep up with new developments. Like right now, what we're seeing with is like AI in general. Like schools are still like they're like lagging behind and like regulation as everything is. So I think that's
Hmm.
probably the issue for a lot of reasons too.
Yeah, you guys are getting away with a lot more than future generations will be able to.
I don't
we
know.
haven't we haven't created those systems and structures yet.
I was wondering so about that. Like when you're trying to implement this system of this curriculum in the schools, like how's that being received? Like, is it how easy it is to get a school to add a whole curriculum per se?
Yeah, I'll be honest, we actually just became a nonprofit today. We applied back in October. Yes, thank you. It's kind of a big celebration. We applied back in October, but it took the IRS 7 months. So we haven't been able to actually implement our curriculum into the school system yet. Um, However, I will say that we have had exactly zero people in education disagree with this need and the want for this type of curriculum. We have researched and asked a lot of students, a lot of parents, a lot of educators, pretty much everybody in that system. And 100% of those people say, yes, absolutely. These types of supports are absolutely what our kiddos are needing right now.
Oh, that's
Does that
really
answer your
great.
question?
Oh, for sure. So, like, what's the plan now moving forward? Like, how do you even begin, like, changing the curriculum like that?
Yeah, I mean, our goal really is will be free. So that makes it really easy for our schools to implement. And we've tried to keep it as hands off as possible and really like as easy for them to adapt it. So we only just ask for them to give us like 45 minutes to an hour in their week long schedule. And our goal is, I always say equity or accessibility is equity or equitability in that like we want to make sure every kid is able to get their sort of social, emotional, mental health, all of this kind of stuff, those needs met every single week. Um, I was the kind of kid who I struggled with my own trauma, but I was always like very well behaved and quiet and never would have been like acting out. And so the way our current structures are in our schools, those are the kids that would typically, the kids that are acting out are the kids who would typically get those types of supports. And so our program is computer based, so it's not, we're not putting it on our kids' shoulders or anything. I mean, our teachers' shoulders or anything, but it's something that kids can really um, tune into and be part of that self-guided process.
Yeah. I
Do
think I
you think
definitely
this?
see it a lot
Mhm.
in our community that it's really hard to reach out to get those resources because it's almost like a feeling of admitting, oh, there's something wrong with me, but when really
Hmm.
you're just trying to reach out a hand. So I think that's definitely a great thing you're doing.
There's so much shame in our society. I feel like that's one of the biggest things we're combating is like everybody wants mental health structures and wants these types of things, but not for me, right? We're always like, oh, I don't need this, but like everybody else does. But there's so much shame in that. And, I think there's a lot of shame in anybody who has been othered or marginalized in our country as well. I think that there's a lot of shame for people who are not in that demographic as well, because they have to like kind of show up and be this strong men or whatever. I think that no matter which perspective you take in these sort of topics, there's so much shame. Um, and honestly, if I could wish for something for your generation, it would be to like not feel shame.
So I was wondering that too. Like, do you think this program would be better if it was like mandatory for all students, or do you think it'd be better if it was more like a choice program?
Our goal is to not make it like graded or anything like that. We want to make sure our messaging is like super, super transparent with the students that no teacher should ever ask you like specific questions about stuff you're doing, or your peers shouldn't ask you like it should be very private. And so in order for it to be really private, you can't turn it in, obviously. So it's a very, I don't want to say optional because that feels like, yeah, you could do it or not, but it's like a do it at your own pace and do it how it fits your needs in a very safe kind of space. Um, but like requiring the time for the students to actually do the work, I think is something absolutely.
Are there any programs that like are in schools now that you'd say like, oh, this is like the most similar to what we're trying to do? Or is it just like nothing even in the realm?
That's such a good question. In elementary schools, they're doing things like SEL, social emotional learning. And you guys are young enough, you probably remember some of these things where they would say, like, zones of regulation, right? Like, are you in the red zone or the yellow zone or the green zone? And
Mm-hmm.
they, in the elementary school level, they do, quite a few of trying to understand navigating hard emotions, things like that. I don't think it's quite as deep and as helpful and beneficial as what we have. Our goal is really triaging and sort of targeting our middle school, high school, and college age kiddos. Because I do think that a lot of times you move out of elementary school and we just kind of like are like, oh, well, I guess they must have it all and they've figured out all the hard stuff and I don't know. But I think that's when life gets a lot more stressful and that's when we extra need to have those supports in place. I would actually love to switch that question back to you all. Do you feel like in schools you got enough of support in these needs when you were going through school?
Hmm. I think like for us, like what Isabella mentioned earlier, there are like supports in system. Like we have like school counselors, we have like those resources. But I think a lot of people aren't just gonna take that step to like reach out and make that first like jump. So I think having this sort of program in schools would definitely be, I feel like way more of a support because then it doesn't feel as scary to like use it per se, you know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally. Isabella, would you agree that this feels like something you're not seeing in school but would be helpful or?
Yeah, I think it's almost kind of the action of minimizing yourself because I don't know about your area, but for us, we live in a quite like overpopulated area, I guess. So we have a lot of students sharing this small pool of resources, and although that I think if you were to reach out, people would be there to help you. Sometimes you might feel like, oh, those people who are acting out, like you said, they might need it more than me, when really there's not this measurement of emotional support. Like, you should be able to reach out when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like everybody experiences trauma. There's different levels of trauma and there's different like degrees of trauma. And there's, sometimes in conversations we'll say like big T versus little T, but like all people experience it. It just looks different.
Now I
Absolutely.
know we can't ask you to like go over the whole curriculum in one podcast, but is there any lesson that you think is just like super impactful and you're like, wow, this one really touched me and I wish a lot of people could hear this?
Oh my gosh, for folks your age, I feel like our sleep hygiene perfectionist, um oh man, you're gonna make me take out my table of contents. I think perfectionism honestly is an spoken kind of thing that we need to be teaching about and talking about more in schools. Because I think social media has created a generation of, a generation that is very worryful and full of worries because y'all are overexposed to all the things, and that's traumatic. But also, social media has given you all this, given everybody, I shouldn't even just say y'all because like adults too, but this like standard of what is and should be that is not necessarily realistic or obtainable. So I really love doing our perfectionism conversation with folks your age because it is, I have a lot of parents that will come to me at parent teacher conferences and they'll be like, my kid just won't do anything. They're so lazy. And I'm like, they're not lazy, they're perfectionists. Like they don't want to do it if they don't feel like they can do it 110%. So it's not that they don't want to do it, they're lazy. They just are fearful of like disappointing you or not doing it well enough or whatnot. I would also, I think that one of the things I would love for your generation, like I was saying before, guilt versus shame. I think there's so much shame in our society. If you've never read Brene Brown or heard Brene Brown, I highly suggest you check out Brene Brown. Her work, she has spent her whole life just digging deep into guilt versus shame. And I personally don't feel shame. I am a big proponent of the growth mindset and really embracing my faults, embracing my mistakes, being the first to admit them, but also being like the first to go through the growth process with those, whatever mistakes. And so again, if I could help anybody and everybody move out of shame, it is like the most liberating work you can do. And again, I think that there's shame imposed on us no matter who we are, no matter our size, our color, our looks, like no matter what it is, we have so much shame imposed on us. And to be free from that is just an amazing feeling.
After what you said about the parent teacher interviews, I'm starting to think that this curriculum should be made available to parents too, because I think a lot of them.
It's funny you say that because actually it is.
Oh, okay, I
um,
wish.
I'll tell you a little bit more, but our goal is to really make it free and accessible to our students, but we also want it to be free and accessible to our educators because y'all are old enough to know and young enough to still know that your educators are very hyper-stimulated. They're not able to process things for 40 hours a week because they have kids in their body or in their business all the time. It's a very high stress job. So we want to make sure we're giving these skills to our educators, but we also want to make sure that we are giving it to whomever is at home. So mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister. I don't care. If you're raising our students, we want to make sure you have access. I always give the example of why we came to this sort of way of doing things. I checked myself into a mental health facility and learned all these amazing things. And then I came home and my husband wasn't doing these things or talking about these things. So I was kind of like up here doing the work and he was still down here in like some of our old toxic behaviors. And I said to him, I need you to either go to the same facility or hit the road, you know? And truly, I want to do the same thing for our students is like really bubble wrap them, all of the same language, all of the same skills, all the same tools. Because my generation, the generations before me, like we have to play catch up. We didn't know how to do this stuff when we were your age. and we're still learning. So we want to make sure that we're really giving this curriculum to all of the adults, honestly, not just in their school setting, but in the world. We have like a pre and postpartum mom and dad's group. We are working with a substance abuse center. We have a junior board that's working on getting this out to transient or homeless people, getting our curriculum out to folks who are maybe without a home. We really like, if you have a brain, we are hoping to be able to be accessible to y'all, truly with the intention of helping the next generation break generational trauma. Because again, if we don't all understand this work, we're never going to help the next generation.
For sure. And I was wondering specifically too, because I know, even though the curriculum would be great if it was international, worldwide for everyone, there's definitely going to be places that won't be able to get that in their schools. So I'm wondering, like, are you going to be able, like, putting it like online somewhere? Like, is it going to be available for someone to just like maybe
Yeah,
just Google it and be able to look at the lessons?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll have, when we're fully developed and everything, we're still in kind of that developmental stage. But yeah, like if you are not in school and you don't have a kid in school, and you don't have like an organization that's adapted our curriculum, you absolutely could still like go on our website and do like a subscription model and still get access to our curriculum. We do intend on being international as well because some folks on our team are international. And so part of that is we have promised them that we will try our hardest to bring this to their country as well. So
That's so
Oh, that's so
exciting.
nice.
yeah. But can I put a plug for Junior Board? Because I'm assuming your audience is probably similar ages to yours.
Go for
Um,
it.
So we have a junior board. We are always looking for more folks. 12 to 22 is our general age range that we're looking for. And again, like you all are my bosses. I have a team of 75 that listen to you all specifically. And I I have dealt with a lot of children and students who have had traumatic things happen. So I'll actually give you a scenario or story. One of my students that I taught when she was in third grade, she unalived herself this past last summer, and her best friend is on our junior board. Um, and it's been a really great way for her to kind of take that trauma and sort of figure out how to be part of that solution. You know, I always tell my students, don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. And I think that there's a lot of kids in our society right now that are seeking for better. They are looking for better from the adults in our world, which me too, I'm also looking for better from the adults in our world. But I think there's a lot of our younger folks that are looking for guidance and not necessarily getting it in the places they're seeking. And so would like to inspire anybody who is 12 to 22 who's listening or watching this to reach out to us on undomindset.com, and be part of the solution with us. We really, I would love for our junior board to be a lot bigger than it is currently, because again, I want to make sure, I always tell my team, I have no ego. Tell me if it sucks. I just want to make sure we're putting out the best product for your generation and really helping them to break those cycles.
How big is your junior board currently?
We currently have 6 people. Our goal is to have at least 12. So, yeah.
I think that's great because you're encompassing a bunch of youth perspectives and you're really focusing in on what matters, and I really love that.
Yeah, and I also always say that like we absolutely should have a seat at the table for everyone. Um, I don't think we are ethical or equitable if we don't have a seat at the table for everyone. And so when I look for the adults to join our work, I very much look at the demographics of who we have on our team to make sure that everybody's lived experience is really representative in the work that we're doing. I would say same thing for junior board. That is my goal. I don't think we're quite there yet. We do have only girls on the junior board, so I would love to get some boy perspective, male perspectives, to make sure our curriculum's speaking to them. But again, if you are of a diverse, you are, maybe even othered in our country. You're of the demographic that has been othered in our country. This is a really great way for us to be heard and make sure that our representation is in the right places.
Awesome.
Oh, we admire your dedication actually like being representative so much. I think that's really awesome. So yeah, if any of you guys are listening and are interested,
Go join.
Yes, thank you. And if you two want to join, by all means.
well, maybe we should, Isabel.
We'll chat after. To end us off, do you have anything, last things you want to shout out or anything you want to say to our audience as a whole?
Yeah, well, I'll shout out our socials. So if you check us out on social, Undo Mindset, and then again, our podcast is on all the podcasting platforms, Undo Unplugged. But I think the last inspirational thing I will say is that remember to treat yourself like you would treat a friend. I always tell kiddos that you are stuck with yourself for forever. There is nobody else on this planet you are stuck with for as long as you are stuck with yourself. We tend to be the meanest to ourselves when in reality we should be the nicest. And if remembering to talk to your friends kindly is a way for you to remember how to talk to yourself kindly, then do so. But your inner voice is really important and it should be positive and it should be supportive and it should be loving and caring and everything that you would do if you were your own best.
Thank you so much,
That's so
Erin. This was
lovely.
awesome.
Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for
Thanks, ladies.
talking.